The first example we see for sequential games is this Stackelberg game. It's basically a sequential Kunor duopoly, where we have a Stackelberg leader, which is the American Airlines. The Stackelberg leader can make the first move, decide its output quantity, and then there is this Stackelberg follower. In our case, it's the United Airlines. After the Stackelberg leader has decided its output level, the Stackelberg follower can decide the follower's output level. Because now we have one duopoly firm move first and the other move the second, the first mover now in this game has an advantage. It's typically called first mover advantage. In this setting, the follower can only choose its best response after the Stackelberg leader has chosen its own output level, so the Stackelberg leader can predict what the follower will do before the follower actually acts. The Stackelberg leader then uses this knowledge to manipulate the follower's decision when choosing the Stackelberg leader's own output level. As we can clearly see from this game tree, American choose either 48, 64, or 96, three different output level in the first stage, and then after that, United Airlines, the second mover, choose the three different output level given the output level chosen by American Airlines. For United, there are three different subgames for all three different output levels by American Airlines, and in each of these subgames, United will choose one output level that can maximize its own profits. Again, as we have said before, the first mover's payoffs, in this case we are talking about firms and its profits for the firms, are listed in the first place in the parentheses, and then the payoffs for the United Airlines, the second mover, are listed in the second place in these parentheses. Now we can start to try to find the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium by using backward induction method. In each of these three subgames, United will choose the highest payoff output. So if American's output is 48, United will have to choose 64 to achieve the highest profit. And if American's output is 64, United will choose 64 again in this subgame to achieve 4.1 profit. If American's output is 96, the best response for United is to choose to produce 48 and to earn this 2.3 for its profit. What United here is doing is, given the American Airlines output level choice, United will choose the output level that give United the highest profit level, conditional on American's output level choice. Obviously, the best situation for United, the second mover, is that if American can choose to produce 48, United will be able to produce 64 and earn 5.1. And United would like to threat American Airlines to prevent American Airlines to produce at higher quantities. So United can say, I will produce 96 if you choose to produce 64. Or if you choose to produce 96, I will always produce 96. And that will hurt you, Americans' profit so much, and you have to choose to produce 48 first. However, these threats to American Airlines are empty threats because American Airlines know that it has the first mover advantage. It is its own place to move in the first. And once Americans has chosen 64 or 96, United won't really choose 96 as its own output because it's not its best response. As long as United is a rational player, United won't choose 96 to get either 3.1, which is lower than 4.1, given Americans' output at 64, or if American decided to produce 96, United won't choose 96 to get 0 instead of get 2.3 at the output level of 48, because 96 is not the best response for either situation for United. Americans don't need to believe those threats. They are empty threats from the United. In other words, what American Airlines can realize is that even though United have said it will produce at 96, given higher output levels chosen by American Airlines, those kind of equilibria are not subgame perfect Nash equilibria because they are not the rational decision, not the best responses by United given what American Airlines has done. Comparing to United's empty threats, Americans' threat or Americans' claim that it will produce at 96 is actually credible because it is the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium. Let's first look at after American Airlines has figured out what United's best responses are. American Airlines can look at 3 output levels and compare 3.8, 4.1, and 4.6 given United's best responses, and obviously 4.6 is the highest profit possible, so American Airlines will choose 96 as its own output level in the first stage. And if American Airlines announce that it will produce 96 in the first stage, this is actually a credible threat because American Airlines can make the move in the first place to commit to this high output level and force United Airlines to produce the low output level to basically accommodate what Americans has chosen, because the commitment to produce at the highest output level is critical because American Airlines has the opportunity to carry out this threat in the first place. So after we have converted the Kuhnor duopoly simultaneous game into a sequential Stackelberg game, we can see that the Stackelberg leader now have a first mover advantage, and the Stackelberg follower will have to accommodate what the Stackelberg leader has done in the market. Let's look at this Deterring entry game next. We have one shoe store in the mall, which is the only shoe store in this mall. And we call this existing firm, this monopoly in this market, incumbent. And this incumbent can pay the mall a fee to obtain an exclusion contract. That means given this exclusion contract, there's no other store can enter this mall to open another similar store. In our case, no other firm can enter this mall to open another shoe store. This fee for the exclusion contract is B in our example. The incumbent does not have to pay this B to get the exclusion contract. Then it really depends on the rival's willingness whether to enter the market or not. Usually in this kind of entry game, we call the rival the entrant. So the entrant can decide either to stay out, do not enter into this shoe selling business in this particular location, or actually open another shoe store in this mall. But to do that, the entrant, this rival firm, has to pay a fixed cost to set up the store, that is capital F in our example. If there are 2 shoe stores in this mall, the incumbent will have to face the competition from the rival. It will bring down the profit of the incumbent from 10 to 4. That means the incumbent will lose 6. Again, the second place in this parenthesis are the profits to the second mover, the rival. The incumbent's profit are in the first place in these parentheses. Obviously, the best situation for the incumbent is to pay nothing and the rival do not enter into the market. In this case, the incumbent can enjoy the 10 profits. However, if the rival sees the opportunity to enter and incumbent hasn't paid for the exclusion contract, the rival can pay this fixed cost F to enter, and the incumbent's profit fall from 10 to 4. Another choice by the incumbent is to pay for the exclusive rights to be the only shoe store in this mall by paying this B out of the 10 profits. In that case, the rival cannot enter this market and makes nothing, 0 profit. Now let's think about what can be the possible outcome by doing backward induction for this dynamic deterring entry game. First of all, we look at the endgame on the do not pay branch for the incumbent. The rival will have to choose either enter the market or not. We know that the rival will choose to enter the market if this profit is higher than 0, which means if the capital F, the fixed cost, is less than 4. So if F is 3, then the rival can make 1 by entering into this market. So the rival will choose to enter this market. But if the fixed cost is too high, it's above 4, then the rival will stay out of this market. The rival will not enter into this market. Clearly, the rival's entrance decision depends on the value of this fixed cost, F. If the fixed cost is too high, the rival will stay out of the market. If the fixed cost is not that high, less than 4, the rival will enter into this market. Now let's think about the first situation, so-called blockaded entry. That is the incumbent's dream situation, where the cost to enter in this market for the rival is so high that the rival will never enter the mall to establish another shoe store, and then the incumbent doesn't have to pay the cost for the exclusive contract. So the incumbent can keep this whole 10 units of profit for itself. Obviously, as long as this cost for the exclusive rights contract is higher than 0, do not pay 1 penny is the best response for the incumbent in this situation. The second possibility is so-called deterred entry. That means the incumbent has to do something to prevent the rival from entering, because now we think about the situation where the fixed cost is less than 4. Once the fixed cost is less than 4, the best response for the rival in this subgame, after the incumbent chooses not to pay for the exclusion contract, the rival will enter into this market. So to prevent the incumbent's own profit drop from 10 to 4, the incumbent would like to pay something to exclude the rival from this market. And the amount the incumbent would like to cut out for getting this exclusive right to operate a shoe store in the mall is 6, because after all, the incumbent only need to lose 6 if the rival enters into this market. So as long as the cost of the exclusion contract B is less than 6, the payoff here, 10 minus B, will be higher than 4, and the incumbent would be happy to pay, let's say, 5 to get 5 here instead of getting 4 if the rival enters the market. A third possibility is called accommodated entry. That means the mall may choose to charge a fee for the exclusive rights so high that it's higher than 6. So let's say 7. Then 10 minus 7 is 3. If the incumbent pay for the exclusive rights, it only gets 3. But if the rival enter the market, it will only bring down the 10 by 6 for the incumbent, so the incumbent can get 4, which is higher than 3. So now, because the exclusion contract costs so much, the incumbent rather just do not pay for it and let the rival enter into this market. The result is that the rival make this small profit by 4 minus F. Let's again say F is 3. the rival will just make 1, but the incumbent make 4. Drop down from this 10 if the rival does not enter. Still, the incumbent rather the rival do not enter, but the exclusive right to have the only shoe store in the mall just costs too much. So the incumbent rather let the rival in this accommodated entry situation. So basically, if the fixed cost for the rival is too high, the incumbent don't have to pay this fee for the exclusive rights B. Or if this cost for the exclusive right is too high, if B is higher than 6, the incumbent will not pay. Because 6 is the damage can be done by the rival, and if the cost of the exclusion contract is too high, higher than 6, the incumbent rather just take the damage from the rival. In other words, the mall will only receive B if it is less than 6 and the fixed cost for the rival is less than 4. What we can see here is that find out what you have to pay for the exclusion contract or what your rival has to pay for establishing the new store is very important in analyzing the sequential game. In the limit pricing game for entry deterrence, we have a different order of moves. In this game, the entrant can first decide whether to enter into the market to compete with the incumbent or not. And then at the second stage, if the entrant has entered into this market, the incumbent can decide whether to cut price to fight with the entrant or to maintain the price to accommodate the entrance by the rival. Because the order of the moves has changed, the payoffs or the profits to the entrant now is at the first place in the parentheses, and the profits to the incumbent now are at the second places in the parentheses. If there's no entry, the entrant stay out of this market, the incumbent can enjoy a profit of 12. However, after the rival enter into this market, the incumbent can accommodate the entry and got the profit cut by half to 6. Or the incumbent can fight. The incumbent fight the entrant by cutting its price, and the result can be that the incumbent can still lose some money, but by a smaller amount, 4, only gets a profit of 8 instead of 12, but the price cutting strategy can hurt the entrant by bringing down the entrant's profit to -4, incur a loss for the entrant, instead of 0 if the entrant stayed out of this market. In this specification, we can see that cutting price after the entrant has entered into this market is the best response for the incumbent because 8 is higher than 6. Cutting price, start a price war against the entrant, gives better payoff than accommodating the entrant for the incumbent. So the threat by the incumbent to start a price war is credible, and cutting price will be the best response for the incumbent. So the entrant better just stay out of this market. To get nothing is better than lose 4. In the subgame Perfect Nash Equilibrium, the entrant's strategy is now to enter into this market. For the incumbent, the strategy in the subgame Perfect Nash Equilibrium is to cut price if the entrant enter into this market. The key reason for this effective entry deterrence is because when the incumbent start to fight, it can still earn a higher profit comparing to accommodation or comparing to maintain the old price. To have this kind of result, if the incumbent cut the price, it can still make a handsome profit. It requires the incumbent to have cost advantage. Even after cutting the price, the incumbent can still sell a large amount of output and resulting a high profit instead of losing money or making a very thin margin on the output because of high costs. If that is the situation, we will see this profit after incumbent cutting price will be lower than 6, and then that won't be effective entry deterrence. Now let's look at the other setup where cutting price results in a profit for the incumbent of 4. This number is lower than this 6 because we can assume that the incumbent now do not have the cost advantage. If it start to fight a price war with the entrant, it will make less money than accommodate the entrant. So now the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium is actually for the entrant to enter into this market, and then after the entering by the entrant, the incumbent will accommodate that entrant or say maintain its price. Obviously, the incumbent still hope that it can make a threat saying that I will start this price war and you will lose 4 to the entrant, and then keep the entrant out to still make these 12 profits. But the entrant knows all the payoffs. The entrant has the complete information about the payoffs, about the fact that the incumbent does not have a cost advantage. If it starts to fight this price war, it will lose by more than accommodating this entrant. So the entrant can figure out that the price war threat is an empty threat, and the entrant can still decide to enter to gain this 4 instead of making nothing. So in this case, because the incumbent cannot credibly threat to start a price war, the entrant just enter into this market and make 4, and the incumbent, instead of making 4 to start a price war, the incumbent will choose the best response to make 6 after the entry by the rival. Here, our assumption is that this entry game only play once. However, if this game is played repeatedly and there's incomplete information about the payoffs to the incumbent, starting a price war may still be an effective way to deter an entrance. Let's look at the textbook example next. In this example, the constituent game can be repeated because we assume the incumbent is a chain store. So the rival will try to enter into the many different small towns occupied by the incumbent already. And then in every single small town, this entry game can be repeated. Let's look at the game first. So if the entrant do not enter into a particular market occupied by the incumbent can make 10. But if the rival enter into a market, the incumbent accommodate after the entrance, the incumbent can make 3, and the rival can make 3. If the incumbent start a fight, the incumbent can make 1, a loss from 3. But the entrant can lose 1, comparing to staying out of this market. So if this game is only played once, obviously the best response for the incumbent after the entrance is to accommodate. 3 is better than 1. Then the entrant look at 3 after the entrance and the accommodation by the incumbent, compare that to 0. The entrant obviously will choose 3. So if this game is only played once, the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium is for the entrant to enter into this market and for the incumbent to accommodate. However, if the entrant does not know accommodate is the best response for the incumbent, and the incumbent just fight with the entrant every time it comes to its market, in this situation, the entrant do not have the complete information about the payoffs in this game. Then the incumbent can utilize the incomplete information to fight every time the entrant enter into the market, even though the incumbent know that accommodation is a better choice. But the incumbent can keep fighting until the entrant believes that fighting is actually the best response for the incumbent. That basically means the incumbent is building a reputation to make sure the entrant believes that every time if I enter into the incumbent's market, I will get -1. So I'd better stay out of the incumbent's market. Then in this repeated game with incomplete information, it can be a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium for the incumbent to fight all the time as a long-run rational strategy to deter the entrance by the rival. In other words, when this game is played repeatedly and there's incomplete information for the incumbent's payoffs when it's fight or accommodate, then fighting against the first rival or even fight for several times can be an effective deterrence strategy for the incumbent. Now let's look at the use of cost and innovation strategies to deter entry. Here we have an incumbent which is on monopoly, and this incumbent can invest in robots on the assembly line to lower its marginal cost. But the robots are very expensive and the saving on the marginal cost can be limited. So with this investment, even though the marginal cost is lower, the incumbent may actually reduce its profit from 10 to 8. So if the incumbent do not face any rival as potential entrants, then the incumbent won't invest in these assembly robots. That is the ideal situation for this monopoly to just make 10 instead of making a heavy investment and only make 8. Suppose that the incumbent does not make the investment on the robots. The entrant actually sees there's an opportunity to enter into this market because possibly without the robots, the production capacity of the incumbent is also limited. So after the entrant entering into this market, the incumbent just accommodate and each of them can earn 4 as profits. On the other hand, if the incumbent has the robots on the assembly lines, after the entrant enter into this market, the incumbent has the capacity to produce a large quantity to flood the market, lower the market price so much, instead of making 4, the entrant only can make -1, just lose 1. The incumbent is not much better off because the lower price it has to accept on the large output quantity. However, the incumbent will not lose money because the robots help to lower the marginal cost. So the incumbent makes 2 instead of the 4 with the investments on the robots after the rival entering into this market. Let's look at the backward induction and the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium. In the top subgame, after the incumbent made no investment, the entrant will compare 0 and 4 and choose to enter into this market. In the lower branch, when the incumbent has made the investment, the entrant will compare 0 and -1 and choose to stay out of this market. Based on the best responses in the subgames by the entrant, the incumbent look at 4 versus 8, and 8 is the better number, so the incumbent will make the investment on the assembly robots. Basically, because this investment on the robots make the incumbent's threat of making the entrant suffer the loss credible, the entrant will choose to stay out of this market. And this commitment to high investment in technology makes the incumbent stronger in its own market. And the investment on the robots become an effective strategy to deter entry. Now let's briefly look at the cost strategy of raising the rival's cost. The incumbent here can make the cost for the entrant to enter into this market higher by lobbying the government and make the government implement more regulations on the new firms. And at the same time, the incumbent will try to persuade the government to grandfather or exempt these new regulations on the existing firms. That means the incumbent's own firm. In that way, the incumbent can increase the cost for the entrant after it entered into this market. We can actually further assume that the incumbent need to pay some cost for lobbying. For example, here the cost of lobby is 4, so if the lobbying is successful, the entrant stay out of the market, the incumbent profit will drop from 10 to 6. The incumbent lose 4. But the cost that the new regulations impose on the entrant will be higher. That means if the rival enters into the market, instead of making this 4, the rival will lose 2 because of the high cost of regulation. That high cost is 6. 4 minus 6 is minus 2. So on the top branch, the entrant look at this subgame after the incumbent has raised its cost for entering into this market. -2 is less than 0, so the entrant will stay out. On the bottom branch, the incumbent did nothing to lobby the government, and the entrant look at the profit after entry, it will make 4 instead of 0, so enter will be the best response for the entrant in this small subgame. After figuring out the entrant's best responses in the two subgames, the incumbent understands if it does nothing, the rival will enter into this market and its profit will be 4. But if it increases the rival's cost, the rival will stay out of this market and the incumbent can make 6. And 6 is higher than 4. So the incumbent decided to lobby the government and raise the regulatory cost for the rival to enter into this market. The hold-up problem actually shows us an example where the first mover has a disadvantage in a game. In this example, we have two players. One is ExxonMobil, which will decide whether to invest in Venezuela or not. If it can invest in Venezuela and the Venezuela government does not nationalize or say partially nationalize ExxonMobil's investment, both of them will get 20. So ExxonMobil will get 20 for the investment, so is the Venezuelan government. If ExxonMobil does not invest in Venezuela, then ExxonMobil will just make 10 as profit and the Venezuelan government gets nothing. However, after ExxonMobil has made the investment, this investment can become a hostage because it cannot be moved out of Venezuela. So, as the second mover in this game, the Venezuelan government can decide to nationalize the investment made by ExxonMobil. If that happens, the Venezuelan government gets 32, but ExxonMobil can only make 8. And ExxonMobil can compare the 8 with 10 if it thinks the Venezuelan government will nationalize its investment, then just go elsewhere to invest in oil production. However, the Venezuelan government can make promises before ExxonMobil makes investments so as to make ExxonMobil more comfortable to invest in Venezuela. The problem of the hold-up game is that once ExxonMobil has made the investment, those promises is not the best response by the Venezuelan government here, because by partially nationalize the plants in Venezuela invested by ExxonMobil, the government of Venezuela can get 32 instead of 20. If ExxonMobil realize That will be the eventual result. ExxonMobil will just invest elsewhere at the beginning to get this 10 instead of getting this 8. So the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium in the hold-up game here is that for ExxonMobil to invest elsewhere, and for the Venezuelan government, it will nationalize the investment made by ExxonMobil once ExxonMobil invests in Venezuela. Since the best response for the Venezuelan government is not to keep their promise to treat the foreign investors very well after they have made investment there, the foreign investor will never start to invest in Venezuela. Because of this kind of hold-up problem, the mutually beneficial investment for ExxonMobil to get 20 and the Venezuelan government to get 20 will not happen. There are different ways to avoid holdups, and you should check our textbook for the different strategies that can help to prevent the holdups and make the mutually beneficial investment move forward. The managerial problem in this chapter considers why in the market for CPUs for personal computers does Intel advertise substantially while AMD does not. This example actually goes back to the first mover advantage. Basically, Intel can commit to a high level of advertisement and then make AMD actually suffer if AMD also advertise heavily in the market. And let's look at the payoffs here. In the first stage of the game, Intel can decide the advertisement level, either low or high. If Intel decided to make a low-key advertising campaign, AMD can choose whether to advertise heavily or not. If AMD advertise heavily, AMD actually get 8 and Intel only get 4. If both of them remains low-key, each of them just get 2. But if Intel choose to advertise heavily in the first stage, and then AMD can decide whether to advertise heavily as well. Here the situation is that if AMD goes head-to-head advertise against Intel, AMD will pay a very heavy cost for advertising, and it actually bring down its profit from 4 to 3 if it just keep a low-key advertising level. So the subgame best responses for AMD is to heavily advertise if Intel has chosen to remain low-key, and to remain low-key if Intel has chosen to advertise heavily. And then for Intel, reasoning with backward induction, it will compare this 4 and the 8. Obviously, advertising heavily will be to the benefit of Intel. So in the CPU markets for personal computers, we see that Intel advertises substantially while AMD does not.